Hey, welcome to Pete's Got Questions.
Welcome everyone. My name is Pete Roberts. I've been a member at Boulevard Christian here going on about 9 or 10 years. I attend with my wife Lindsay and our 2 kids. I'm joined today by Pastor James McCracken here at Boulevard. We're going to talk about just some questions I have, and we'll have a good conversation about invitation and what it means to invite people. We were recently challenged by Steve and Randy, and we've been challenged by you as well. Those are ministers here at Boulevard. The challenge was not to just invite people to church, but invite people in our lives. And well, I have questions about that.
You've always got questions.
All right.
So
first question would be, and I may end up writing some notes, so don't let me.
Writing notes?
Yeah, can you believe it? Like really, I'll actually listen to you today if you can imagine. So I really want to know this and ingest this. Okay.
Besides sleeping.
Exactly. Yeah, I won't, not all. So I will keep engaged. Okay.
Right.
My first question would be, and I don't want to distract you if I write any notes or anything, just to let you know what I'm doing.
All right.
My first question would be of the Pete's Got Questions episode 1.
This is episode 1.
Episode 1 of Pete's Got Questions.
Uno.
First question is inviting somebody, is that definition just inviting someone to church or an event that we have at church here at Boulevard?
Pete, there's lots of ways, there's lots of things going to inviting. I think that when we're talking about invitation, it is first of all an invitation to start conversations.
Okay.
Because, there may be events that you can invite people to, or you can invite them to church, but that feels like headhunting to those who are on the other side of the table to you, that's carrying on the conversation. And if you already know the person and you already have a relationship with them, and you've talked things, about different things in their life, you get a close relationship in that, you can go ahead and say, hey, this weekend at Boulevard, I know that we're talking about such and such or something, and it's a subject you might be interested in. You want to join us? We'll take you out to eat afterwards.
I got you.
And I'd come for a meal
Promise
anytime.
The food.
Yeah, promise
the
food.
food. Wow.
They'll always come. But I think that to begin with, learning to get into conversations that may include an invite has a whole lot more of a spiritual impact upon people. And the whole art of learning to start spiritual conversations, and it's not a science, it is definitely an art.
No.
So I love doing that. That's something I like to do. You get start conversations maybe with waiters at restaurants, and then you follow that up maybe with an invitation to meet outside the restaurant and talk about some different things. Those are fun things to do. But when I'm meeting somebody, I'm trying to kind of get the lay of the spiritual land. Okay. Where are they in that situation? I'm listening to try to see where they are spiritually. And so I think probably the first thing in initiating conversations or even an invite is not by us speaking, but by us listening. So we're listening to see what their interests are. We're listening to see, where they may be. I had a conversation. This is going back years ago in an airport. I was flying from one place to another. And I'm sitting there. I missed the flight connection, so I'm sitting there, along with a lot of other people, and I'd already read the book that I had with me, and so the guy sits down. Actually, it was a woman sat down next to me, and you're feeling a little uncomfortable. It's a female and all this, but she has this big medallion on that was pentagram, and so I said, well, that's an interesting piece of jewelry, and so I wanted to see where she was spiritually. And we got into a great conversation because she made the piece herself, and she was actually a follower of Wiccan, and she was anxious to talk about her jewelry and her journey to Wiccan, and so I just wanted to listen. I knew that I had some time on my hands, and she had some time on my hands, so I'm not trying to rush the conversation along, but I'm asking to and the hard thing when you get those conversations is when they say something and you're talking to a witch.
Yeah.
And she brought up several things that I disagreed with pretty strongly. And so you got to turn your truth meter way down and not want to defend Jesus at every turn. Actually, Jesus doesn't need a whole lot of defending. And so, she said some things, and my problem is I want to jump in and defend. I kind of like arguments, and or not in the argumentative kind, but just those discussions. So you got to listen, and you got to turn it down, and there's times when you have to say, "That's intriguing."
You're right. Sure.
Can you tell me more about that?
Well, that brings me into the next part of this. If I'm intimidated to start that conversation, or if I don't feel like I could be someone that defended every question, how does that conversation then go from just commenting on something about them, or if we had already started a conversation, listening to something that was, of importance to them, something that we just, you like this game that we're watching together, or we're sitting at the kids' soccer practice together. Some piece of information. If I'm a little bit more introverted, or if I don't know where to go with the conversation, if I'm listening, that means I've got to prompt them in some way. Is that questions, or how does that conversation go? Where to even lead into that, to start that?
Well, there's kind of some different layers going into the whole idea of being a little insecure about it. You've got what they're saying, you've got your feelings about how am I going to answer this? Right. And you've got then, how do I engage in a manner that we can have a healthy discussion? And so all those things are playing at the same time. I would say that this is really a reliance on the Holy Spirit thing, that where we don't have to have all the answers.
That's good.
And and sometimes people ask something, and you just say, "Man, that's a great question. I'm not sure. Let's get back together. Let's talk about that."
Okay, so that furthers.
Yeah, so that gets you another conversation on it, or you can say, "Well, tell me a little bit more about what you believe about that."
All right.
And then something that I do quite often is I say, "Man, I like to read. Do you like to read?" "Yeah, well, I like to read." "I'll tell you what, I'd like to talk about this some more, and I'll read anything that you want me to read on that subject. If you'll read something that I like to read on it, and we can question each other. It'll be a good, healthy discussion." Okay. And very rarely have I had somebody turn me down on that. So. Okay. And so I don't have to know all the answers. I have to just be able to pick a good book.
Right.
And not something that's going to, knock their socks off, but be able to continue that conversation.
I think this is a little bit easier to do with people that we know, right?
It is, but it's always a risk. And with risk comes some times when people don't want to talk to us,
sure,
but they're not rejecting us necessarily personally. There may be other things going on in their life, and the risk for us, it's just like if you've ever done rappelling or something like that. You feel so uncomfortable about it, and yet you do it the first time and it becomes a little easier the next time. And so it's just actually kind of saying, okay, I've got this fear, so I'm going to take a step in that direction. And God gives us confidence with each step we take, and when we have to rely upon Him, it's an adrenaline rush doing it.
Yeah,
it really is.
It sure is. Yeah. The few times that I've had a conversation with somebody where I've initiated just, hey, where do you go to church? What do you believe? Oh, you used to go to church. So one of those kind of conversations, it was a rush for me. Yeah. Speaking of the uncomfortable part and the risky part, it is, I would not want to sound and use too much church speak or sound too churchy talking to somebody. Mm-hmm. Is that a risk that we run into maybe with somebody that is never been to church? I mean, part of the mission statement here is we're reaching unchurched people.
Right.
Somebody that isn't a part of church. It wouldn't even have just a background of who Jesus was and what He did. Is that something we should be mindful of while we're talking to somebody or opening that conversation?
There, in the last, I don't know how many years, but it is flipped. For a long time, people had some idea of Christian concepts. The culture we live in right now have no ideas. So when we throw around the big words of Christianity, justification, righteousness, they don't have a clue. And so, you just talk without trying to do the Christian speak. There may be a time and place for that, but when you do, you have to explain what you're doing, and then you lose the conversation style of it. So those sorts of things may come later. Okay. So going back to the fear thing, it's everybody has those fears, and the only way you get over, just like any fear, the only way you get through it is to take a step in that direction of that fear and find that it's not as big as you think it is.
That's true. But we're given so many gifts by the Holy Spirit. This is something that anybody can talk.
Yeah.
Right.
And some people are better at it than others.
Some people are there for it. Getting to the conversation and the risk in that, there's not really a risk in just starting a simple conversation about your life. Like, why aren't you worried right now, or what in your life is going well, or this is the reason, or I've even said lately I feel better about being back to church in person, mm-hmm. and then having our Wednesday meetings in person. I feel better about those things, and I could explain to somebody how I felt better and what it meant to me, mm-hmm. Because I think church is important. So that's snuck in a few conversations lately.
Yeah, and as you begin talking back and forth, then you can bring some of your own experiences into it, of how God has done something in your life. Probably want to stay away from words like He's blessed me.
Okay.
Things of that nature, because they don't have a clue what a blessing is. And sometimes we as Christians don't have a clue. But nobody talks about blessing except crazy Christians,
Okay. Yeah. I think it's used too much. I'm told, at least at the line at McDonald's, to get a coffee with the dog in the morning, I'm told to have a blessed day by who I pay and then who I pick up. So
if you didn't pay, they wouldn't say that.
Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe they're concerned that I get a large coffee too often per week with my big dog in the truck. Going, and I don't mean to harp on this too much, but it is a question I have. Starting a question out, or starting a conversation out with just questions, is actually worthwhile.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to necessarily be anything about Christianity.
Okay.
Are you interested in this Thunder game?
Yeah.
And just looking for common denominators. There's sometimes you get in a conversation and you're thinking, God, you're going to have to do something here, because, man, there isn't anything this guy talks about that I know anything about,
Maybe I'll learn something.
Yeah, maybe I'll learn something from this gearhead that I don't know much about cars.
But that's part of the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
I mean, if we really are concerned that we need to help, reach this person and get them into a relationship with Christ, okay, I'll be a little uncomfortable. Yeah.
And the relationship, their relationship with Christ, their relationship with God, just know that God's already concerned about that ahead of time.
Right.
And the Holy Spirit actually helps you at those times coming up with words that you don't even know that you had within your ideas in the conversation.
Right. I've often found that the most likable people are the folks that ask questions about me.
We all like to talk about ourselves.
We do like to talk about ourselves. But would that lean in a little bit in we need to watch our character a little bit when we start engaging in conversations?
Yeah, I had somebody tell me once that when I'm engaging in those conversations, that our character is so important. And he was talking about this guy who was a campus minister on a college campus. He got into conversations all the time. And he said, how you react when they are blasting like the church or Christians or things like that is extremely important, because you don't have to defend, and he may be, or that person may be saying something that you've done several times, and so you may feel very defensive, but being aware that how you behave, being willing to suffer for the cause of Christ, and that suffering may mean that I don't have to defend myself. I can take one for the team in order to have a stronger conversation later. Okay. That's kind of humility, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So character becomes a big part of it. Listening to find out where they are, and then when you find out what where they're interested in, things like that, finding that connection to relate it to a spiritual matter. I think I shared Sunday about a guy who's a part of our congregation now had tattoo sleeves all over it. He had visited a church 15 years before, and somebody in the church told him not to come back unless he was going to cover up all those tattoos. And he said, God didn't like my tattoos, then I didn't really care for him either.
Wow.
And so sometimes you have to apologize and say, I hate that happened to you. I'm so sorry. Mm-hmm. And then make some conversation about how God cares for you, and it's a surprise. And what people in that situation are looking for is, do you really believe that God cares for me? And if they don't necessarily think or say it in those words, but if you're his representative, I'm going to do something that's really reprehensible and see if you still care for me.
Wow, I hadn't thought about it that way. And really, perception could be just in how they perceive how we carry ourselves as well. Like, would I even want to go to the same church as that guy Pete? Right. Yeah. That's tough.
So sometimes it's that way. De-churched can have lots of reasons, and generally, people have come to a point, generally in their college years, where they thought something was true about God, but that was a misconception. We did a series here, about a year ago in the fall, about different gods we had, the boyfriend God, and I don't know if you remember the series, can't remember what we called the series, but we talked about different people's perceptions of who God is, and that's really the issue.
The fake news series?
Huh?
The fake news series?
No, but that's kind of around the same deal. This was the year before. Okay. And I think it was in the fall. We did that.
I've often wondered if it would be sometimes hard. We've talked about people that haven't ever been to church and getting that conversation started, and then those that have maybe been to church before. But it hurts me sometimes too to know that The only time I know that some member of my family has heard any part of a gospel message is at a funeral, or if they're in a corporate prayer with us, it is at a wedding. Is it not withstanding like reason that we can actually start talking to our family about it? And I mean, how does that conversation start and not just alienate you with your own family members?
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, they know you and you know them.
That's true. We have my wife's sister has 2 girls. Rough time growing up. They went through a tough divorce. The whole idea of God being a father really ticks them off.
Okay.
And
wow,
quite often during family gatherings, of course they know what I do, and they've attended church here and stuff, and it's really been interesting. It's hard to engage them in conversation. One of them especially has definite opinions and that there is no God, and yet she spends a large amount of time on Facebook and everywhere else being mad at God and saying how stupid Christians are, and yet she doesn't want to engage in conversations about it. And there's obviously a hurt there, and yet whenever it's funny in the family dynamics of things. She has a daughter and went through a bad divorce, and when she was hurting that, the first person she called was Tria, and they've had some significant conversations, and Tria's kind of gone through, talking about the hurt that her dad put on her, days before the divorce and things of that nature. So it's a long, slow process, and you can only go short inches at a time. And sometimes you get wider openings than you do otherwise. I think the thing that you got to keep in mind is you don't have to share the whole gospel at one time.
Right.
There's times that you wish you had said more, but you just got to follow the Spirit's lead on those things.
Yeah, it sounds like you're listening to 2 things at once. You're listening to that conversation, and you're listening to that, and you're listening to that the coaxing or the leading of the Holy Spirit there too. Now, when we're listening to somebody, especially in that instance there, I don't need to validate what they're feeling or anything like that, but I need to listen to what am I listening? Am I listening for an understanding from them? And
we're listening to see what the hurt really is.
Okay.
And you're listening to see what's behind that hurt and why that brings the anger towards God.
Okay.
And that's a good time to ask questions. Hey, Roxy, can you explain that to me? What is that hurt? What's behind that hurt? Sometimes they don't, because they don't know. They get pretty hyper, but she's come back around later and said, I've given that some thought. Here's what's behind that. Sometimes it's another rant, but it's interesting.
So if it's not just the one time that we have to do this, if we're looking to engage in multiple conversations, it could be what you asked about, like, okay, you have a question for me.
That was from Thanksgiving, then wasn't answered till around Easter whenever we got back together.
So I mean, we can even prompt further conversations with somebody, right? Just, just, hey, let's both read this together, like you mentioned.
That's a great way. If you're a reader, that's a great way, because then you can, 12 chapters in a book, you can meet 6 times or 12 times for that matter, and go through it, and then that generally brings up stuff.
And if you didn't know a question right away, that would prompt a further conversation.
Yes, to be honest. Don't try to.
Right.
The worst thing you can do is try to fake your way through something.
Yeah, I don't need to do that. Yeah, and then food.
Food.
You mentioned
Always food.
Okay.
Food
Food will
sounds
help.
good.
Food will help. I like that. I don't have a lot more conversation about this or questions about this. I feel like I could actually engage somebody, and I think the engagement would really start in listening to understand them, listening to understand to ask even more questions, and then not knowing that or knowing that I don't have to know it all up front. Like it's almost like I know. To be evangelical, sometimes even in like a street ministry, you would need a script or need a prompting or something like that. This seems very unscripted and just
organic.
It's organic. Yeah, it's a good word.
The best way to engage a person in a conversation, deeper level conversation, is for them to realize that you care about them more than for themselves, more than just being there to broadcast a message.
Okay. I like that. I think that's a good point to wrap up on. And I appreciate your time today.
Hey,
thank you much.
This is fun.
If I have more questions, Pete's got questions.
Pete's got a lot of
Pete's
questions.
got questions. We're going to continue with a couple more Pete's got questions to deal with ongoing sermon topics maybe, also, if that's possible, and then also with things that are going on at Boulevard. And for people who have questions about what Boulevard's about.
All right. Sounds good.
Sound good? I'm Pete. This is James. Thanks for listening to us.
All right. Bye.